Hi, and welcome to this tutorial. In today's tutorial, I'll be talking about clean code and why it is important to um, have clean code while developing. So let's just get started and let's not get distracted. So it is important for us as developers to maintain our code and to keep it clean and to make it easier for us and for others to understand if someone needs to debug or refactor a certain problem or a certain logic, and also, to just make it understandable straight from the code without the need for comments or adding comments to the code. So you would probably working on a problem, you get it fixed, maybe you fixed 80% of it, you got called into another project, a few months later you come back and you're trying to understand what that logic meant, or someone else trying to understand what that logic meant. So it is important for us to kind of make it clearer from the code what each thing means and what each thing does, so that nobody spends a lot of time on it trying to understand what it does. So let's just get started. And the first thing I want to talk about is, or first thing I want to mention is, this is probably going to be a series of few small videos. And the reason I'm making them short or small videos is because I want to put all my focus into these videos and not get distracted and talk about other things. So first thing is talking about variables. Okay, when naming variables, we are, you see examples of people naming variables using, for example, saying something like, let R equals, especially in competitive programming. I mean, for us, we don't know what R is, and it is not really useful or clear for people to leave that in the code. So don't ever do something like that. Don't ever leave like just gibberish. Basically, you need to make your code easy to understand for you and for others. Okay, but really emphasize on the others, because you might be able to understand what Rx means, but others might not understand it. You don't want them to come back to you and be asking you a lot of questions, and you having to spend time to to go over the code to understand it and to explain it to them. So you want your code to be very, very clear from just looking at it. Okay, so to let's say we have a variable called name. Okay, or we have a client. Basically, we're working on a client application, and then we would have a variable, we want to say the client's name. It is not really clear what name stands for. We could have multiple things that have names. So we could have clients. Client has a name. His partner maybe has a name. The client application could have you know a lot of variables or a lot of name values that can be used. So we don't really know what name is. So we need to be very clear and make it clear to the user or to other developers what this variable is and what we will be using it for. So this is a bad example. It's fine to use something like that in a small application or small functions that have basically not much logic, and that's focused entirely on just what's inside that function. But in a real life scenario, it's good to be very descriptive with your variable namings. So something like client name tells us that this variable will hold or store client's name, client's value, basically. And when we want to search or debug certain things, we know where to go. So we know this is client's name, so we know how will be used. It just makes it a lot more clearer and easier to track and debug if we have problems. Okay, so that's one way, or that's naming strings. Okay, now the other thing I want to talk about is naming boolean variables. And so when naming Boolean variables, we usually tend to not really care a lot. And that's, I'm included in this talk because previously, a couple of years back, I would name my variables, you know, anything. Like, for example, I would name a variable something like, um, const um, show is, tire showing, for example, just an example, really. I can't think of something out of my head, but tire showing. I don't know what tire showing is. I don't know what that is. I don't know. Should that be a string? Should that be a boolean? It doesn't really kind of, describe its value. So, the example I want to show you here is the is visible. So when we're saying is visible, so let's say we have a big component, and inside that component we also have a loader, okay? And then I name something is visible. Now it is clear to me that it's a boolean because we're using the is. And just for the record, if you're ever naming booleans, try and stick to is, has, should. Basically is, has, should. This describe that we're naming a boolean. And so this is, it's describable that it's a boolean, but it's not very descriptive. I don't know what's visible, you know. So a good example would be if we're talking about the loader, I would suggest to add the name of what we want to be or what we're checking for. So in here we're checking for the loader if the loader is visible. So is the loader visible? And it is just very, very clear that this is going to return a true or false value. And I would really suggest you name your variables with is, has, should. Not that many people name their variables with should, but it's mainly with is and has. Or if none of these fit, then be very, very, be very descriptive in naming them and use your own imagination. Okay. So that's one way for booleans. Now, naming numbers. Again, with numbers, number not very descriptive. If I want to name a number of clients, then I would say number of clients. This is more descriptive. It tells me what this variable will hold. And it tells me if this wasn't a number, if it was coming from a function or coming from something else, it kind of gives me, a sense of understanding of what this does and where it's coming from and all that. Another thing is if I have a large number. So it's typically with const, and especially in JavaScript, we don't really have to name the variables in capital letters, but it is suggested that we should. And it's up to you really if you want to name them in capital letters. In my case, sometimes I name them in capital letter and I add underscore to them if I know 100% these variables will be used in the multiple locations and they're constant, they will never change. Like for example, when working with Redux, the constants are always named like this. I always name my constants like that. But in this case here, like this is totally fine if you'd like to go with that. But if I wanted to name or work with large numbers, I could do, basically this is a trick for you guys. So this number, when having it like this, it's a big number, so it could be very, very confusing. So you could actually add underscore to divide it to make it clearer and easier to read and understand. And when you print that number, it will actually print it out as a whole number. So let's just let me try and open the which is Quokka. It's like a JavaScript playground within your VS Code. So in here, I'm just gonna print it out, constant.log, okay, to show you how the number will be printed. And as you can see, guys, here, this is the number. This is how we separated the numbers to make it easier to read. And this is what's printed out at the end, okay? I also named it with, I capitalized every letter and I underscored every word to show you that this is another way of naming constants. Okay, so this, of course, this is better than saying something like const milliseconds. Like it makes no sense basically. Like what am I talking about here? Milliseconds, and obviously we know what milliseconds are, but milliseconds are like hour milliseconds. This it's better to be very descriptive, I think. Um, so I'm gonna keep this on in case we need to work with something else or toggle something else. And we go to naming functions and function related tips and tricks. So when naming a function, guys, obviously this is not entirely bad. Okay, if we're working with something that has one name, if we're working with, for example, um, a dishwasher class, okay, and that dishwasher has a name variable and has a class or has a function called getName, then that's entirely fine because we know what we're getting. We're getting the name of the dishwasher. But if we're working in something big where there is multiple names, okay, then this is, using getName could be very, very confusing because I don't know what name I'm looking for or what name I'm getting. Am I getting first name? Am I getting surname? Am I getting dishwasher name? Am I getting car's name? What am I getting here? So a good idea or a good way to name it, just like you name your variables very descriptively, then you name your functions as well. And in here, I have get client's name, okay? Now this will tell me that this function will return a string and it will return a client's name, okay? So it's returning a client's name as a string, basically. This is more descriptive than this, don't you think so? In my opinion, having something descriptive is better than having something kind of vague and generic. It makes no sense to me. So it's better to focus on always naming your functions and variables very, very well to describe what they do and what they will return in at the end. Another thing is naming boolean functions, guys. So naming a boolean function, this is fine in a way. Like it's not completely bad, but it is bad. Like enabled flag. Enabled flag suggests to me that the flag will, that will return a list of flags that are enabled. Okay, so it's not very descriptive. I could name it something else, but that was just an example I wanted to give you guys. So when naming a function that's a boolean, basically a boolean function, or a function that returns a boolean value, it's better to stick to what we talked about in variables as well. We need it to be easier to understand and we need to know what it's returning. So I want to know what what the function does and what value or value type it will return. And in here, guys, we're saying is flag enabled. Now to dissect that, is flag enabled. So I know that flag, this function will be returning a flag. And in here I'm saying is enabled. So from that I understand it's returning a boolean, okay? And it's better descriptive than basically enabled flag, which tells me maybe it's returning a list of flags that are enabled. So it's better to kind of invest some time in naming because it will save you a lot of time in the future when describing it to other people and when you come in to read it again and have it understand it straight away without having to go over the whole whole files and whole scripts in order to understand a single function. Okay. Now the third thing, or the one of the last things I want to talk about for today, like I said, this is going to be a list of videos, guys. This is not one. This is going to be a list, okay? So I know I'm not covering much here, but I wanted to focus on, the things I want to talk to you about. So the last thing I wanted to do or talk about is parameters. Now, it's considered to in functionality in functions in JavaScript. It's considered to have either 2 to 3, basically 2 to 3 parameter per function. And it is suggested that if a function has more than 4 parameters, then it is considered as a function that does multiple or many things. It's considered a function that has many things and should be split into small mini functions. Okay. Now I'm guilty of this as well, guys. I used to write functions that have multiple parameters, and basically the function will grow as I need to add more and more, or as I needed to return more information, or more as I needed to do more logic or calculation. So something like this, it is in some cases, or it is considered bad practice, because I'm passing 5 different parameters. But in essence, guys, it's not completely bad, but maybe it could be split into small different functions. Maybe get user could have a function that would say something like get personal, get personal info, something like that. Then we could have something get country info. We could either call them inside here, or we could even just call them one by one outside this, But my whole point here is splitting the code, or not splitting it, sorry, I meant to say having your function to accept 2 to 3 should be your priority, 2 to 3 parameters. Anything above that, it is considered the function is doing more than what it's supposed to do. Okay. Now a good example that I've learned recently is to actually pass in an object and then destructure from the object. Because when you're passing in an object, if you think about it, if we're saying get user, and in here I'm just passing in an object with name equals Mike, age equals, this is considered one parameter really, because you're passing an object, and in here I'm destructuring what I want to extract from this object. Obviously I didn't complete this. I'm just going to say etc. Obviously this is not valid, but I didn't complete the whole object here. So in here I'm passing in name. I'm passing in an object with name and age. And in this function I'm extracting name and age, and whatever else I want to extract from that object. Now this is considered a good practice. Obviously destructuring is a new thing, and I know a lot of developers, they just, they kind of let go of the old things and the old JavaScript things, and they latch on to the new stuff, and they consider the old stuff bad practices. And I'm not like that. Obviously, I still kind of work with this sometimes. If I need a function to have more than 3 parameters, sometimes it depends on the case, but I might add it. I might have 4. Sometimes rare cases I might have more than 4, but I think this is a great example to follow, and I'll be using this approach from now on in most of my code. I've already started using it and implemented it, and hopefully in the next while I'll be using it completely and avoid the use of this way. Obviously people will argue that you can use the arguments object inside the function, which is basically arguments like that, and then you could get the arguments that are passed using like the index, or you could loop through it, but that's another thing, and it's better to be avoided for now and to focus on the new stuff. And yeah, moving forward, guys. This is all for today, guys. I'm going to be coming again with another video very soon, and we'll dive deeper into different things. and obviously we'll explain more things hopefully. And yeah, it'll be great series. So hopefully you like this video, and I'll see you again in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.